about love. Every love is bound to maintain it. You got to knock the legs with an eye. Don't throw a stone, you don't know. Stop what you say, it's what you do. Don't throw your stone.
Hello and welcome back to Out on That Line. This will be track 8. We will be going over Lianne La Havas' self-titled album, as well as Run the Jewels RTJ4. I'm here with my co-host Alex. Alex, how you doing?
Not as good as these albums, Geoff. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, these were 2 good ones. I mean, I'd never ever even heard of Lianne La Havas before you mentioned this one, and RTJ, Run the Jewels, have been listening to them for quite a while now, so I was very excited when this album came out. I'm very excited to finally get to talk about it on the pod.
Well, Dad, that's what's so great is because when it came out, I think you and I texted about it. I'm pretty sure the first text I got was from you. You were like, oh, fuck, RTJ4 came out early because they released it, and not to jump too far ahead, but it was released in response. They had it in the can, and it came out a little early in response to the George Floyd protests. But I remember getting the text from you and being like, oh, shit, and then trying to get everyone else in the friend group to listen to it. And I don't think a single goddamn one of them ever did. So this will be the first discussion I am having about it as well.
They'll listen now.
You will listen!
If you consider yourself a friend of ours, you will listen to this album now.
God damn you all.
First, I did want to mention that we do have, I didn't want to put this at the back end of the episode where, it might get kind of skipped over. But we are planning on doing an episode regarding the 500 greatest albums of all time list released recently by Rolling Stone. It's just their updated list, the 2020 version, updating from their 2003 version. So we're going to have another episode released probably a couple days after this first one in the middle of the week, probably. Give you a nice little nugget of Out on That Line pod, our opinions on that. So we'll give you a chance after you listen to this episode. You'll be able to go back, look through that list, and then listen to the episode with us, where we kind of discuss the movement of some things on that list and some new arrivals, things like that. Just want to let people know about that.
Yeah, totally. And as always, we want to hear what you think too. So once the episode comes out, do your homework, look at the list, kind of figure out what was most controversial or surprising for you, and then hit us up on our socials.
Yes, all those socials. You can find us Instagram at Out on That Line, Twitter at Out on That Line 1, the Gmail, the ever elusive Gmail. You'll never guess it. It's going to be outonThatLine@gmail.com. Just let us know, what you think about that episode, as well as keep those album submissions coming in. We want fresh content. We want new content for you. So just keep those coming in, and we can keep this rolling.
That's right.
Excellent. What do you say we get started?
Let's do it.
All right, so starting right out with Lianne La Havas. So Alex, you're the one that suggested this album, so tell us a little bit why you did that.
So if I remember my timeline correctly, I believe her last album before this self-titled one came out 5 years ago. It's because I distinctly remember listening to it in grad school. And then before that, I had listened to her very first album, a couple songs from it, really liked them. There's one in particular, there's a track, Lost and Found. It's very beautiful. It's very haunting. Completely different than anything you'll hear on this album. But I remember getting into her and being like, oh, this is really nice. I'm a big fan of neo soul and Quiet Storm in all the forms it takes. I mean, technically you could call D'Angelo neo soul, and it's very raunchy and sexually charged. And you have Sade, who's, again, very romantic, maybe not as graphic as D'Angelo. But I really enjoy that genre a lot. I think it's really atmospheric. I think there's a lot you can say and do with the music, especially like how expressive it is. So I really ended up liking Lianne La Havas, bought the second album, which the name escapes me, unfortunately. I think it's Green and Gold, but don't quote me on that. I know that's a song off it. Ended up buying that, really liked her, and kept waiting for her to put out more music, and she kept kind of teasing updates like, hey, I've been working on stuff. And then just years and years and years passed with nothing. And so when I looked into it, it turns out that in the last 5 years, she lost her grandmother, her great-grandmother, and her mentor, who is one of my all-time favorite artists, Prince.
So she knew him personally.
She knew Prince personally.
Okay.
Yeah, she's my age, and she fucking was chilling with Prince, living my literal dream.
That's incredible.
losing him was a big blow because a lot of people, I feel like there's a tendency to be like, oh, I was so upset when Eddie Van Halen died because I've picked up a guitar 3 times in my life and I really feel connected to him that way. You know what I mean? There's a tendency for people to name drop and kind of oversell the relationship.
Yeah.
But she worked with him and had a genuine closeness with him, and it was her mentor. So it was this tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. All of this on top of the music she was making, while really good, the music she was making on her first 2 albums was really more studio influenced. They had an idea of what she should be and what they could sell. And they were wanting her to use her innate talents, but in service of what they were trying to package. So this album, I think it's apt that it's self-titled because it's the first time she really gets to show off what's important to her, what her influences are, and what she can really do if you turn her loose.
That makes a lot of sense because I did kind of read into the background of this album a little bit. And before I go any further here, the album in 2015 was called Blood. While you were talking about Prince and all that, I was like, might as well look this up so we have it ready to go. So it is called Blood. So definitely, check that album out as well. And I'm going to, when I get, a few minutes here after the pod, just to familiarize myself a little more with her, because that does make sense. And hearing that she was influenced by Prince, you do hear some of that on this album, that kind of style, because he definitely did get into the neo soul style, not always, he's definitely got huge number of influences, throughout, funk, punk, whatever you want to say. Prince has probably done it, but you can definitely hear that neo soul, almost like the stuff he did with the album where he's got like 3 eyes.
Plectrum Electrum.
Yes.
No, Artificial Age. Plectrum Electrum is the one he did with Third Eye Girl.
Yes, Artificial Age. Yeah, that's the one. That's that kind of Prince. That when you made that connection for me, that kind of got some pieces fit together for her making this album. So that's pretty cool. So I guess, let's get right into it. So it starts right out with Bittersweet. And one thing I noticed kind of throughout it through the first couple songs, and then I looked it up to confirm, but it is like a storyline. It's not necessarily a specific, like she picked a character and we're just going to follow that protagonist all the way through. But, the themes and the feelings of the songs definitely have kind of a beginning, middle, end. And it's funny how many albums do that I never really paid attention to before doing this podcast, but it's definitely very cool. And when looking at it through this lens, this first song, Bittersweet, I get the sense that it's like really kind of renewal. Like she's coming out of a shell, some kind of like past thing. So likely a relationship, had run its course, but maybe not for, run its course for her, but maybe not for the person that she was in the relationship with. It seems like she's trying to kind of batter them back a little bit from trying to get in touch with her. And I'm not sure if I got that right, but you can let me know what you think.
Yeah. And to your point about the album having, it's another one. We've hit a couple of these where it's not quite a concept album. It's conceptual. So that's a great recurring bit for us. But for me, there was a strong delineation right down the middle. There's this interlude that she hits in the middle of the album. And that for me separates life leading into the relationship and enjoying it and reveling in it into the dissolution of the relationship and all of the changes that's going to force. And I think a lot of it, she zeroed in on a romantic relationship because I think that's just very readily available. But you can definitely tell that in doing so, she's influenced by the loss of, again, Prince, her grandmother, her great-grandmother. Not to, again, go too far ahead, but the song Green Papaya, or Sour Flower, which is right at the end, is based on a saying that her grandmother used to say to her. So it's clearly very influenced by the important people in her life, and she translated that into this story about growth and change. And even emblematic of that, and I realize it's not necessarily a technique thing that she did on purpose per se, but having listened to her for a while, it seems like her vocal range increased too. She hits notes in this that I don't necessarily remember hearing her hit in Blood. So she
definitely can sing.
Oh yeah,
she can sing.
She can fucking sing. The thing is, your mileage may vary on her vibrato because it's very unsteady. Like when vibrato, for those who don't know, when you sing, it's the little like fluttery noise that people can make. It's literal vibration, and with her, it's a little like wah. Not quite that exaggerated.
And she'll kind of trail it off and changes the pitch while she does it too.
Yeah.
And I was into it. I think where she does that, it fits. I think there's a lot of music where maybe that wouldn't work. But I think with this, because she doesn't, it seems like throughout the whole album, there's not a lot of, to me, through the songs, she's fine with morphing the musical identity of whatever song she's in, so when she morphs her vocal identity, I'm good with it. I think it fits with how she put the album together. And it didn't take me out of it at all. And in fact, I think if she had done, those perfect vibratos, like you would hear, a professional opera singer do, where they have to keep it at the perfect pitch, in the perfect area, the perfect tone and all that. I think if she had done that, it probably would still sounded fine. But I think it adds emotion, when she breaks it up like that. And I think she's very good at putting the right things in the right places. I think throughout this album, I kind of noticed that she's good at doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it would be a little boring if the voice was too perfect. Like there are a lot of technically excellent singers who just aren't that interesting to listen to because there's no real stamp that sets them apart. Like you can tell when you're listening to Tom Waits and you can tell when you're listening to Bruce Springsteen. So like very different vocal style. And even a better comparison would be like Tom Waits and Pavarotti. You hear a big difference between those. So I like that it's just like, I don't even want to call it imperfect as though it's a flaw because it's technique. She could theoretically fix it with heavy use of air quotes if she wanted to. But I love that at the appropriate moment, she just walks right up to the edge of the note, potentially becoming just slightly sour and off kilter. She can just bend the pitch in such a, like you'd bend the fucking string on a guitar. It's really neat how she just takes it right up to the line. So I appreciate the vocals on display. And furthermore, throughout this whole album, one of the cool things that I really, really appreciate about, and it's threaded throughout the entire album, is how she uses the sound to express the emotion more so than the lyrics. And it's interesting the comparison between our two albums because RTJ4 is, I would dare say that the lyrics are the feature. That's what you're there for, is the message and the clever things, and we'll get into all that, the clever things that they're saying and doing. That is the feature. But with her, she could almost be saying total fucking nonsense, and through pure inflection and the way that she uses her voice, you get the emotion. And there's specific examples coming up that I can point out, but I just think it's a great, first of all, comparison between the two albums, but it's also a great technique on her part because it just kind of reduces that distance between you and the album.
Yeah, and I think she's very good. She's not singing about anything that, the majority of people in the world haven't also been through. So I think when you recognize the emotions that she's putting forth, so she's able to just express herself completely with those vibratos and with those different tonal elements throughout the songs. It doesn't necessarily always have to be just with the lyrics. You're going to get the idea because if you can pull at all what she's singing about, you can put yourself in kind of the same place she was in when she wrote the songs. And I think that's really helpful for a listener to be able to understand, the meaning of a song and really be able to connect with an album is by relating it to a personal experience. When you get too specific, and you're really name dropping like the towns you're in and the specific names of the people that you're with, you remove the ability for people to really connect with that because you're almost, each time you give another detail like that, you're almost building another wall between you and the listener and their ability to emotionally connect with what you're doing. And I think she just does a very good job with not doing that. She keeps things general enough that you can imagine it's about your life, but specific enough that you know what she's singing about.
Well, and interestingly enough, the other person who did that really well was Amy Winehouse, and you definitely get shades of Winehouse again, soul and that British soul especially.
Yeah.
There are a lot of shades, especially in this first track, Bittersweet, of Amy Winehouse. So it's kind of again, like I said, it like reduces the distance between you and the themes and the album and the artist, and it gets you a little more sucked into it. Because I will say, to kind of, as a spoiler on my overall thoughts on the album, I really like it, and there are some songs that some patches that didn't really hit for me.
Mm-hmm.
But all the same, I felt sucked into the entire ride. At no point was I like, I'm going to go make a sandwich.
Yeah, I think in general, for me, I did like the album quite a bit, and certainly more when I went through the lyrics and everything. When I was just listening to it, a lot of it sounded very sonically the same.
Yes.
Throughout the album, there were some good parts where it kind of broke it up, but if you just listen to the album and you don't pay attention to what the words are or kind of what the feelings are, it's gonna be kind of a boring album. There's not a lot sonically that's really exciting or really kind of takes you over, but it's when everything is put together, when you pay attention to it all as a package, that's when the album really shines. If you're just trying to pick out like, is the music the strongest? No. Or the lyrics the strongest? Well, no, you've probably heard better from other people. But when you put all those together and add in the emotion with which she's singing the stuff, that's what takes it to another level, to an album that I would certainly go back and listen to again.
It benefits from active listening. And I realize we still haven't really talked about the first song, but I almost think that this album, because of exactly what you just said, will kind of run out of ways to say the same thing a bunch. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of saving ourselves a little work here, but it's an album that benefits from active listening, because if you do just throw it on to make a stir fry and, flip through your phone and all that stuff, it's background music, 100%. But when you sit down, lyrics in hand, and there are some people who would argue like, well, you shouldn't have to enjoy music by sitting down with a notepad and like dissecting the whole thing. But I don't know, maybe I'm a fucking weirdo who, when an album comes out, I sit down and I listen to it like I'm listening to someone I know pour their heart out to me. Like giving it, like if you were like, yo, I have problems, do you have 45 minutes for me to tell you what's going on?
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing for me. So I don't know, maybe other people, I would assume people that listen to this podcast love music and probably treat it with the same deference that we do.
Yeah, I would assume. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's also just having, a curiosity about what you're listening to, and I think that's when artists like this get a chance to shine versus, the kind of mass produced stuff that, don't really want to name drop people because it's not about calling someone else out. But, the folks that, just put out a song and there's not a lot of meaning behind it, you really kind of lose. If that's all you listen to, you're never going to be curious enough about music like this to really get into it. So I think if you're spending all your time listening to music that all you do is put it on your tiny speaker and listen to it while you're cleaning the house or something and don't pay that much attention to it, then this album's not going to be for you. But if you're interested in getting to know an artist and getting to know what they're singing about and relating it to yourself, the best way to do that is with albums like this and actively listening to it. Like you're saying, I mean, when you read a book, you don't just skim the words and just forget everything you read. What's the point of reading at that point? So for me with listening to music, it's, if I'm not going to understand what they're singing about, there's not much of I'm not going to go back to it. I might enjoy listening to it once, but if there wasn't anything they were trying to say to me that I could relate to, probably not going to go back to it again.
Yeah. No, I would concur.
Yeah. So we'll move it along to the next song. Read My Mind. I think this one is, kind of, I couldn't tell whether she found somebody new or if she was talking about the beginning of the last relationship that she had. And this was kind of like a flashback type of thing. But either way, there's certainly some sort of, a new beginning, or something that she's singing about. I really like the line, "No need for hide and seek, I'll let you find me." It's that kind of really flirtatious vibe in this song. And it's really like, we don't need to play games. Like, I'm just telling you, I want it. All you got to do is come over, kind of thing, and I think it's a really, it's refreshing anytime you see somebody that's just honest about it, I think not hiding behind little clever wordplay and things like that, I think is very cool in this song.
Well, and it's almost like you're so in love that you've lost the ability to play it cool. You're completely overtaken by the joy of being around this person and what you found with them. So your defenses are down. There is no more pretense. You can, it's crass, but you can shit with the door open in front of them and you don't care anymore. It's just your guard is down. You're letting this person in and you're enjoying every minute of it. And I think, again, musically, perhaps more than lyrically, because I would agree her lyrics are not necessarily anything you haven't heard before. Something like Green Papaya is, using a motif that it's No Pink Cadillac kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But her lyrics aren't like blow your hair back, innovative or clever, but take them again with the sound that she's making, and that perfectly conveys. It's almost like writing the soundtrack for a movie. This is a sad scene. We need the music to kind of rise to that occasion. Mm-hmm. She does a really good job at that. So this song, Read My Mind, it's this flirtatious, throw caution to the wind kind of vibe, but it's nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. And I think she's very clear about the messages. There's very few songs on this album that I wasn't immediately aware of what she was singing about. And I certainly can appreciate when there's that sort of kind of raw emotion, that she's not hiding it behind a bunch of, the phrase you like to say, a bunch of word salad. Mm-hmm. She's not hiding it behind that. It's very much just like that neo soul kind of thing where they're not trying to make it confusing and trying to make you unpack what they're feeling or what they're saying. They want to tell you straight up so that you can feel it with them. And I think that's really admirable. And she does that, I think, in this song about as well as any other song on the album.
Yeah. And I'll say it a million more times before we're done reviewing this album, but it's the vibe. It's the sound. That's a big quiet storm, neo soul trope is the emotion is conveyed through the sound and through the style of singing, almost more so than the lyrics. The lyrics are there to support, exactly what it is you're singing about, but the feeling you get is from the music, which is nice because we do a lot of lyrical interpretation on the show, and like that's great, and it's so much for us to sink our teeth into. So this was a fun challenge to have to more interpret the music than anything else. Yeah,
and I think it goes to show how good she is that we're able to interpret those emotions at all.
Yeah,
that we're able to understand it. I mean, I don't know, Lianne, if you ever listen to this and we've got it completely wrong, just let us know.
Yeah.
I think you're good enough at what you do, that it made it pretty obvious what you were singing about, especially on Green Papaya. This next song. So apparently, papaya is an aphrodisiac. I didn't know. There's probably a zillion I don't know about, but specifically green papaya.
Oh yeah, the greener the cleaner, stuff, baby.
The unagi, if you will. In this one, there's no doubt about what she's singing about. It's definitely, I can just read some part of the chorus. Take me home. Let's make real love. And there's no debating what that's about. No hidden message here. I think it continues from Read My Mind. And it's just, the walls are down. She's saying, just come and get me. And I think it's very much a feeling that everybody can relate to. I hope at some point everybody's had an experience like this where you just completely let yourself go to another person. And I think, she's just so good at describing that and kind of putting you right back in that place with her.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, the emotion I felt the most, as weird as it is to say during this, was intense jealousy. Because I was like, God damn, it has been a long time since I have felt this way about any other human being. So I have a Bluetooth speaker that I love as much as she loves the guy in this song, and that is about where I'm at these days.
Well, I'm sure we're going to find somebody's going to listen to the pod. They're going to hear your opinion on something and be like, that's the guy that I'm going to fall in love with. You're going to get a little Facebook message, and you probably ignore it because you probably have those closed.
Yeah, I deactivated my Facebook, so don't try it, ladies.
Okay, maybe hit us on the DMs out on that line. If I see it, I won't open it. I promise. Just say to Alex in the subject line, and I won't open it. I'll leave that for, that's between you and Alex and God.
Honor system.
Yeah,
that's how we work out on that line.
Moving right along to the song "Can't Fight." This one is, she knows that maybe she shouldn't be doing this, but it's kind of, she doesn't have quite the willpower, hasn't built up enough for her to stop yet. Like, she's starting to become aware that it doesn't sound like it's totally unhealthy, but maybe she just realized that they're just wrong for each other. But she hasn't, the things they're doing are so fun that she hasn't got up the willpower to say, well, I need to separate myself from this yet,
Or even like, this is a good match on paper, but we're spending so much time together. It's unhealthy to invest so much of my time and my energy and my romance in this one area of my life, because put all your eggs in one basket, what can happen? And this is such a long way to go for a reference, but Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 1, they do a musical number about the Spanish Inquisition, and I just thought of auto de fe. What's the auto de fe? It's what you oughtn't to do, but you do anyway. That was like kind of the vibe behind this song, is like, oh, I shouldn't. It's so bad, but I'm going to do it. I'm just going to keep it. It just feels so good. I need more.
There's a lot of places where I think that reference would get totally lost, but I think here on Out in That Line, and with our audience, you bunch of weirdos, I think that one's going to land just fine.
A couple people are going to pop for the Mel Brooks, I'm sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I like this one. And it's the messages that she's putting through. None of them, I think specifically makes them not complicated to understand, and I think that's kind of a callback to like what Prince would do. You listen to a Prince song, it's really not difficult to understand what he's talking about. He's a very complex man, but figuring out what he was talking about was not an issue. And she's very good, again, at doing that. And I don't know if that's necessarily a Prince influence or if they got together in the first place because she was good at doing that anyway, and he appreciated that about her. I don't know when the genesis of her doing this happened. But it's good. It's so nice to not have to totally unpack something, and that as I'm reading the lyrics, I know what she's talking about, and I can pay attention to the music, and I can really get the full sense of the emotions that she's trying to convey. And I just think it's really, really good.
And what's kind of cool about this point in the album is you can feel more of the world music influence, specifically like Brazilian samba, like really starting to creep in. And, this is such a like film school, pseudo academic, up my own ass interpretation, but it kind of signifies for me the exoticism of love. Like, this is something new and exciting and vibrant and flavorful. And like, as those intense emotions grow, the music kind of celebrates it too. And you start to add in these like very like, I don't want to say panicked strings, but these very like urgent strings that are kind of rushing her along into this and like losing all sense of herself and just going for it. That's a beautiful thing, to love with the brakes off. That's fucking great. But it is an equally dangerous gamble, and that is the sense you get musically from this song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just a couple of the lines: a little peace, a little love, a little bliss. Is that enough? I can't fight away this love. I knew that I should give you up. I tried to run, but got my heart stuck. And I think those 5 lines really encapsulate what this song is about. It's that, this is really fun, but are we sure this is something we should be doing? And again, not that it's unhealthy, but maybe they're just not in the right place with each other in each of their lives to make this work. Maybe it's just fun for now and they both know that it needs to end. But it's so much fun that they are having trouble ending it. So I think it's, again, one of those things that so many people can relate to, that you listen to this song and you don't have to unpack that. You can just feel it with her.
And it's just so much all at once. It's a lot. And what's great is it's very prescient, because it sets us up for the next song where things are like finally going to start to take a turn. If we're going to use a roller coaster analogy, like we've kind of hit the peak and we're about to go down into the scaries. We're getting there.
Oh, yes. The next track, called Paper Thin. And this one, I'll let you start off on this one, because I had a very specific thought about this one, but I want to hear what you thought first.
Okay, well, in the context of what I was just kind of talking about, where the reality sets in, this to me kind of signifies that point in the romantic relationship where you've given yourself over to it completely, and now nothing's going to be easy. You've had the fun, you've enjoyed the honeymoon period, and here comes your first challenge. And I interpreted it as the other person's depression and anxiety and sort of their personal issues, and Lianne La Havas kind of singing about, well, I have these same issues, and no one can really quite understand where I'm coming from, so I think it would be disingenuous for me to tell you that I know where you're coming from, but I want to try. I want to be there for you. You do have a responsibility to let me try and to let me in. Don't be afraid that this is going to push me away. I think this has the possibility of making things stronger between us, because I looked up a concept related to the song, a Japanese concept called wabi-sabi, which is perfection through imperfection, and sort of embracing this challenge that they're facing instead of letting it be a stumbling block. And it's kind of her wrestling with how do you convey that to the other person and making sure they know you mean it.
Yeah. And that, it's funny. That's kind of exactly what I got from this one, is that she's kind of pushing them to be, better, and specifically in the lines, but you're not the only one suffering. That's enough. I know you're made of better stuff. It kind of tells me that she's asking them to recognize things about themselves that maybe they're not wanting to, or maybe they just didn't realize they needed to. But I think it's saying, like, you need to figure yourself out. So kind of pushing them away a little bit, before this can fully work. So it's whether it's like, you got to go sow your wild oats, you got to go do, whatever it is, we're not going to work until you get those things sorted out. But the sympathy and the empathy with which she says those things, she's not calling the person fucked up. She's saying, everybody deals with this stuff, and she's saying, I've dealt with this stuff, you're dealing with it now, but you need to figure it out if we're going to work. And I think it's just a very kind of mature way to look at it. It's very much not that Taylor Swift black and white way to look at a relationship. It's really, it's about growing together. It's about, if this is going to work, we're going to have to figure this out together, and you're going to have to put in the work as well.
Yeah, it's not an ultimatum. It's not tough love. It's just love and support that's firm but gentle. Mm-hmm. You have to figure out, like you said, all these things that are bothering you. You need to figure out where you're at with things. We can't move together. I can support you, but we can't really move forward as a unit until you stop holding me and yourself at an arm's length. So I am here for whatever you need, but the hard work has to come from you. I've had to do it. Other people have to do it. You are strong. You are capable. I do care about you. So it's a very tender, it's not like a combative, again, ultimatum. Like, I look at a song like Kenny Loggins' This Is It. He wrote that for his dad when his dad was, I don't know if he was terminally ill or they thought he was terminally ill, but his dad was very sick. Yeah. And was basically ready to give up on life and just like curl up and die. And Kenny Loggins was like, I'm not ready to lose my dad, and I don't think he's ready to lose this fight. He just kind of needs someone to kind of smack him around by letting him know we care about you. So it's not like, you pussy, you have responsibilities. It's just, hey, this isn't you. You know this isn't you. I know this isn't you. Yeah. And I'm here to kind of bring you back down to reality and let you know, like, this is the moment. You have to decide whether you're going to succumb to this or whether you're going to fight your ass off. And I kind of get those same vibes here. Yeah, that's the really apt comparison. Pretty good song too. But it's you liked a smooth, Geoff. Kenny Loggins, the soundtrack man of the 80s for sure. That's very true. Yeah, everything. I think when your most famous songs are all from famous movies, like there's a very small niche of people that can say that, and he's one of them. But I think the thing with Lianne La Havas is it seems like everything she's doing comes out of love. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of vindictive things. Like, it seems like she's the kind of person that would treat a situation like I would. If somebody is past help or a relationship is past saving, you're not going to just talk a ton of shit about them. You're just going to cut it off and let it go. And I think I get that sense from her where it's like she wants to let the other person be themselves
but she wants them to be the best version of themselves. She'll help them get there, but it's, like you were saying, that hard work has to come from them.
She just refuses to be bitter or jaded in any of her sentiments, and that's so fucking refreshing. Again, apparently it's going to be a new bit on the show, just kind of getting jabs in at Taylor Swift when we can. But like,
let it rip, baby.
Taylor Swift wouldn't handle the same material with such a deft hand. It would all be about like how it impacted her. And it's like her version of this song would be like, hey, fuck you. You've got a hot babe right in front of you. What do you have to be depressed about? If you don't get your act together, you're going to lose me. Like that, I guarantee that would be her approach to this song. Whereas Lianne La Havas is like, yes, this impacts me. Yes, there's a selfish motivation in the sense that I love you, but I love you because of who you are. And I want you to be better because I care about you, not because you're inconveniencing my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the difference between understanding that there is another person involved in something with you versus that situation is only happening to you. That there might be another person involved, but their feelings about it don't matter. I think that's a stark difference when you come at it from that angle versus, the bad angle.
Yeah, Taylor.
Yeah. I know she's listened to every episode. She's making notes.
She's like, I'm going to write a whole concept album about these fucking dicks.
Yeah, out on that line is out of line. Those assholes.
Ooh, shit.
Yeah. The next song is just a little interlude. Yep. Now this one, it's called Out of Your Mind. This one, couldn't tell, and maybe she's talking about both. Is she talking about herself or the other person in this relationship? And then I kind of wrote after that, I was like, it doesn't really matter. It's just a kind of a change. Like you were saying, I think you mentioned before, like halfway through the album, this is that interlude that I think you were talking about. And it's something else is about to happen. There's some change that's happened, and I don't know this one, whether she's talking about herself or the other person. I don't know if you have insight on that.
Honestly, I was as stumped as you are. I think the song functions as a pivot point on the album, but it's, again, hard to know whether she's asking like, hey, dude, are you out of your fucking mind, or talking to herself. And honestly, I kind of enjoy that we don't really know, that it's just sort of this kind of frantic, abstract asking of questions before, again, the descent on this ride begins, because the next couple of songs are where reality starts to get a toehold.
Yes, and starting with Weird Fishes. Now, if you're a Radiohead fan, you will recognize the title of that. I think it was on their In Rainbows album. Yeah. I'm not a big Radiohead guy, but this is a cover of a Radiohead song. There's probably like a handful of Radiohead songs that I really enjoy, but this one was, I thought, very good. And this was the first album where I was like, damn, she can sing. On that kind of the last outro part, where it says, "Yeah, I'll hit the bottom and escape." She can just belt. And I thought it was a different song when it went into that part. I was like, wait, did I just miss? Because I clicked over to my next tab of lyrics and I was like, what is this? Like, this isn't any lyrics. And I looked back, I was like, that's in the same song. And it's just, you can tell it's definitely a Tom York song. If you're familiar with Radiohead at all, these lyrics are as Tom York as it gets, where it's like just vague enough that it could be about anything you want.
Yeah. And I think, sticking to that. And it was such an interesting choice to put a cover on an otherwise deeply personal album that, again, is self-titled and really is about self-discovery and change and transformation. So the backstory that I looked into was she's just a fan of the song and wanted to give her band something to sink their teeth into. And they all decided to learn a cover to kind of bring them all together. And from then on, it just became kind of a standard they could bust out at any time. They all really worked hard on developing it. So she's been doing it for a couple years in concert. And again, I am not a huge Radiohead person either. I like The Bends. That's a fun album. And by that, I mean it's weird as shit. The song Just, I really enjoy that. I took the Simpsons and postmodernism class in college. And postmodernism is whatever the fuck you want it to be. So one day we literally spent the entire class watching the music video for Just, where it's this guy in a suit lays down on the ground and people keep asking him why. And he's like, if I tell you why, you'll join me. and then he tells them, and we don't see what it is, and just all of a sudden, everyone on the fucking planet is just lying on the ground. Just like all these people in suits just laying together. Total tangent, but look up the music video for Just by Radiohead. It's weird. It's trippy. But yeah, I thought this was a really fun cover, and she's, again, really able to experiment musically. The band is able to cut loose. She's able to cut loose vocally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is some really fucking powerhouse stuff from Lianne.
Yeah, this was a song where it's like, you knew she was a good singer, all the way through on all the other songs, but this was the one where she really started to belt it out, and I was like, wow, she's got some pipes, and it's the kind of thing I enjoy, that when an artist that can do that, it doesn't mean you always have to. There's certainly a balance that you have to strike for me to stay involved and stay engaged with your music. And it doesn't always involve you belting as loud as you possibly can. There's plenty of singers that do that, but I think the best singers, you can have all the vocal talent in the world, but if you don't know how to use it to express the emotions and use, pitch the correct way and belt the correct way and sing quietly the correct way, I don't think you can consider yourself a truly great singer. You just have a good voice. The folks that separate themselves, are the folks that can do like she does, where it's like, she doesn't always fire that bullet, but she's always got it in the chamber if she needs it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah. And then moving on, next song, Please Don't Make Me Cry. This one I thought, again, was really good, and she has a way of saying things that you never question what it's about, but she doesn't say them in a very specific, obvious way. So she'll say something like, my heart on your sleeve, kind of a way of saying that she's attaching her emotional well-being to the other person. And it's, that's that saying where you wear your heart on your own sleeve, and that's a very common saying, but she uses that to express a dependency on the other person that's maybe not the healthiest thing. So she uses a very familiar saying that I'm sure everybody has said and heard in their life, but to describe something else, and it's just a very clever little turn that she does there.
Well, and to paint a very morbid image, the impression that I get, there's a fun song for you. The impression that I get is it's almost like if you could visualize it, he's holding her heart in the palm of his hand, and he's got a pen in the other, and he's poised to fucking stab it. And this whole song is, oh my God, I know you're going to do it. It's futile to beg for you not to break my heart, because I know it's going to happen. But I have to ask you anyway, please, please don't do this. I'm begging you. It's got that kind of urgency. Like it really does, without being overwrought and tearing out your hair and like we love Meatloaf, something like For Crying Out Loud, like all of the intensity that kind of comes through with that. She's able to convey that all vocally instead of trying to do too much lyrically and become over dramatic. Like, I can't live without you. I'll never have another happy day. It's just this very straightforward, just don't do it. I know what you're going to do. Don't do it. And if time is a flat circle and you're destined to do it anyway, it just has to be said, please, please don't make me cry. And this is the one, too, where I was talking about earlier, how she has these little vocal inflections that are so perfectly emotional. The little sobs that she does when she's saying please, she just comes out with these really authentic cries that's almost like in the middle of recording the song, that sense memory hits and she can't control it. It's very controlled. She's not like breaking her technique, but it's just this wonderful inflection that she does that's just so, like, it punctuates the emotion so fucking perfectly. This, Bittersweet and Weird Fishes, I think were my favorites on the album.
Yeah, this one I put a star next to on this one for sure. And this I think is her cleverest songwriting as well. Just as far as, having to unpack something, one of the lines that really got me as well. You won't find another dream if you don't get no sleep. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, well, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't do what's right in this moment, you're not going to get what's right later. And I think it's just another way, instead of saying it in plain language like that, she finds a way to kind of hide it behind something a little bit, but not so much that you can't figure out what she's saying. She's not intentionally making it confusing. She's making it interesting.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately I forgot exactly what example I wanted to bring up because I just have lyrics written and circled. I don't. It very well may have been what you said, but I think we keyed in on the same thing where she was taking a little bit more of a chance with the wordplay on this one than in other songs on the album. Mm-hmm. So I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, this was a good one. And moving on to 7 Times, and I think this one was some sort of biblical reference, right? I think, yeah. So it's like the number 7. Let's see here. I copied and pasted what it said here. The number 7 represents completeness, although it is often said that 7 times represents a constant and repeated amount of prayer with no exact numerical limit. So she takes it upon herself to pray 7 times to allow for her partner to grow and overcome his struggles. So it's about, kind of going back to I think it was Paper Thin was the song previous where she was kind of hoping for the best for them. And I think this is a little bit of an extension of that. But I think in a little more direct language, that she's legitimately just praying that they figure out their shit, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely, again, some of the techniques that are employed in the song, I think almost say more than what the lyrics are saying. Obviously, like, not to completely dismiss her lyrics every time out of hand, because the 7 times is obviously very purposeful. But for me, it's this, there's this, like, repetition in the lyrics that for me drives home that image of, like, oh God, please don't let this happen. Oh, please don't let this happen. Please don't let this happen. Just live, just survive. Oh God. Like when you're kind of spinning out and you repeat these things to yourself, the way she does it in the song really drives home that urgency. And this idea of read between the lines, like, oh God, I'm hoping that this person sees what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to do. And am I being clear enough? And just, it's kind of a song about spinning the fuck out, all set to a very samba and R&B flavored sound, which is very interesting. It's got this like very, like the verses all seem very strong and confident, and then when it flicks over to the chorus, it's almost like trying to convince herself of these things. It's a little bit of a backtrack, a little vulnerability. So this is a song that's doing a lot for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, and again, it wasn't one of my favorite ones on the album. I think just specifically because the lyrics weren't quite, I thought, up to par with some of the other ones, and especially following right after Please Don't Make Me Cry. I mean, she kind of set herself up for a tough road there with that one. But, it was, in general, a very good song. Now, moving on to Courage. Now, this one I put another star next to because this one I thought was a return to what I really, really liked about what she did on this album. It's kind of, she's almost personifying courage itself. Where she's asking for courage, and then almost as if it's like, something that she's praying to. I don't know, like the God of courage, whatever that might be. I think it's the way that she does it. It's, you feel that along with her, because everybody's, had a moment where they've needed some strength and didn't know where to go to find it. So she's straight up just asking for it. She's saying like, please help me here. Like whatever is out there in the universe that's there to help me, please, like, make yourself known now,
And there again, musically, there are a lot more elements thrown into this one. I don't think it's exactly a theremin, but it's a theremin sound. There's some like very quirky vibes going out through the song. And I think that kitchen sink approach sort of personifies the desperation. Like, I will take whatever form courage takes right now. I just need it, because ultimately the message of the song is the only way out is through. So this is gonna fucking suck. I'm calling upon my ancestors, the universe, God, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I will take whatever comes my way to be courage, to have the courage to get through this, because this fucking sucks ass.
Yep. And again, she doesn't ever sound like miserable when she's doing it. It's like she's very well aware and always seems to have a good perspective on things. Like she's not in it and is like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. You know, it's like, I know I'm going to get through this, but I need a little bit of help doing so.
Again, that's really refreshing. And as someone who struggles with depression and anxiety, like it's hard to get to that point in your life where you go, okay, I understand that the way that I'm feeling is not indicative of the way things are going to be. And there's a lot of work on my part. Like, this isn't my fault necessarily, but it's going to come from, the solution is going to come from me. So whatever coping mechanisms you need to develop, the best one you can develop is that relationship with yourself, that mindfulness that will help get you through. Because, and this is going to sound harsh, but again, I have been this person. Sometimes with depression and anxiety and bipolar disorder, you just dig your heels in and refuse to see reality. So someone can say like, or you, when you're in the hole, can say like, oh, I'm disgusting. No one could ever love me. Everyone I know wishes I was dead. And you have people that you know, they're like, no, that's the exact opposite. Like, that's why we're here, is to show you that we care. Your perception could not be farther from the truth. No, I'm right. I know that I know the truth, and you're just saying that. Like, you just refuse to see, maybe if it's not, you just refuse to take any input. It's just, you've convinced yourself through this illness that this is the way it is. No one gives a shit, or your perception is fixed.
You're constantly, it makes you very good at finding the worst case scenario and believing that to be the only scenario, and I think that's one thing I've noticed, that it's anybody that I've known that's gone through that. And for myself, I certainly am not going to try to, say that I've had to deal with things like that in my life of that sort of emotion, that sort of feeling. I think I've always had a great support system around me that's kept me out of those situations and just kind of always helped me keep perspective on those. And I think my chemicals in my body have always, gotten along with me pretty well, and I think the folks that doesn't occur for, like I said, they find the worst case scenario. They find what would be the worst outcome of this situation or the worst parts about themselves. And that's all they see, that's all that they're able to see as the only scenario. They're like, well, this is possible, and this is the worst thing that could happen. So why wouldn't this happen? And I think it's finding courage, finding those around you that love you, and, trying to take a bit of their perspective, and understanding that, it's probably really tough right now, and there's no saying it's not, but you got to get through it. You got to find some other ways to think about things and get through it. And I think that's what courage is doing for her.
Yeah, 100%. It's just realizing that the world does not always exist as you see it. And it's hard to say that. It sounds like I'm saying there's narcissism tied up in mental illness, and that's not what I'm saying. But there is something to be said for just allowing that the world exists outside of your head, and trying to see what other people see, and trying to acknowledge what you're feeling and let go of this anchor that wants to bring you down. It's this dark part of your brain that wants to keep you from being functional. So all of this is a roundabout way of saying, through her songwriting, you can tell that she's been through the fucking fire, but has never really allowed herself to linger for too long, and has sublimated all of these experiences into the songwriting process. So instead of hey, I want you to feel how fucking shitty I felt in that moment by directly relaying, it'd be like singing about a wound that you sustained. It was a giant bloody gaping hole and I could see the bone. She doesn't do that. All she can say is, this is pain. There's pain associated with this moment, but it's going to heal. And I promise you that much. And that, to me, is the embodiment of this song.
Yeah. And I think a lot of, I think delves into it the most specifically in that song, but throughout the whole album, she keeps a good perspective on life. She allows herself to feel sad. She doesn't ever allow that perspective to just skip over, to make her skip over these emotions that, she kind of needs to feel in order to be a real human being in these relationships that she's talking about. But she's very good at understanding that, nothing is permanent, and that includes the pain and suffering that she might be going through.
Right.
Yeah.
And it all kind of dovetails with Sour Flower, the last song of the
Oh,
album.
yes. Oh, yes. Sorry, that was a very strange noise I made, but because this was my this was my favorite song on the album. And I think you touched on it a little bit before, but give us another quick background on what this one is.
So Sour Flower is a term that her grandmother, and I think it's a Jamaican colloquialism, but her grandmother used to say, "This is your sour flower. This is your cross to bear. This is something unique to you, and you have to deal with it, and people can support you." But again, this is everything we've talked about on this album and everything we've talked about on Courage. Introspection, put in the work, accept this burden, and the only way you're going to get rid of it is to take it where it's going.
Yep.
So that's kind of the concept behind like how the colloquialism works anyway.
Yeah. And I think on this one, again, and this is kind of a, she touches on like that feeling of the sour flower, which is it's your problem to deal with. No one else can help you with this, or maybe they can help you, but it's up to you to get this done. And it's about kind of coming home, finding yourself, it's that, we've talked about it probably a half dozen times with other artists on this show. It's that classic, I'm coming home. This is where I'm comfortable. And one of the lines that she says that I think was just so brilliant is, "Must have flown 100,000 miles to get back to Brixton." And it's, she traveled all over the world. She did all these things, and not necessarily, don't think of 100,000 miles as don't think of it just the distance traveled. Think of the life experience that she's had, the things that she's put herself through after she's left home. And then she realized she was doing all of that, trying to find herself, when all she needed to do was realize that she was home at the start of it in Brixton. Maybe she didn't realize how near and dear the place was to her heart before. But after all the traveling and seeing the world, she's like, oh, well, I guess home with the people that love you, and her grandmother that, she named the song after, those kind of things are really kind of universal to everybody, and I think, or hopefully, that obviously there's some people that don't have places to go back to, but for the most part we do. Like, I know no matter what happens in my life, like I've always got a place back in Vermont. I've always got a home base that I can go back to no matter what happens. And I think that's the feeling I get from this one. And it's kind of the way she does it though, I think it's just a very beautiful way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. It's just a 7-minute powerhouse song where she kind of synthesizes that entire lesson. It's exactly, I could just repeat exactly what you said, but I think you said it very beautifully, which is sometimes you have to travel the entire world to figure out that going back to the beginning with everything you've learned and going back to the egg, back to what hatched you, and kind of creating a new version of yourself. Not necessarily like a new version of yourself because there was anything wrong with the old one. It's the old one has been improved. Mm-hmm. So you definitely get the sense in this song that she's learned a lot, taken the lessons to heart. And again, it's this good head on her shoulders theme. Like, she's smart enough to know that it's not the end of adversity, but she's kind of humped this cross as far as it's going to go. And now it's time to start a new chapter. And it does. It feels like a very refreshing synthesis of this entire album.
Yeah.
And it's nice. And then the weird thing is there's an extended version of Bittersweet that opens it, and then a 3-minute version of Bittersweet at the end of the album.
Yeah, but it's
not really
lyrics.
sure what's going on.
Yeah, it's the same lyrics and everything. So I think it's I think when she set out with the album, it was meant to be a storyline, beginning, middle, end. And I think putting the same song as the bookends on it is supposed to almost make it kind of like a cycle, like a loop back into itself, which, I think is good. I think that, to me, if that's why she did it, I think it kind of takes away from the kind of linear journey of the album. But I'm not going to, I don't really feel like nitpicking that too much. I think it's a really well put together album. I think we both have discussed how much we enjoy when an artist pays attention to the sequencing and, how things fit together. And I think this is as good a representation of that as anything we've done so far on the show.
And I truly do hope that it's not just a case of the studio being like, let's put the radio edit on the end. Fuck it, tack it on.
I mean, they might have.
That would suck.
That in order to, I don't know, it probably helps in the digital media age. It probably helps with streams and plays and stuff to have, a song that's, the radio edit, but it's like when you're looking for the album and you look on Spotify for the radio edit, it doesn't just show up as a single. It shows up with the rest of the songs on the album. I don't know if that's got anything to do with it. I think it's a whole new world, with as far as how we consume music versus how we used to. I think if you were to buy this like a CD version, I would be surprised if that extra thing was on there. I think it's really in the digital age. It's so easy to tack on these extra little pieces as you go along and release the album.
I will say too, for Sour Flower, I was a little disappointed at first because Sour Flower is also a really great strain of weed. So I was like, huh.
It might be. She might be. That might also be because she was hanging out with Prince. She's doing neo soul. I'm not gonna assume things about people here, but takes one to know one, right? Wink, wink.
So, the fisherman sees the fisherman across the way through the haze.
Yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me. I'm going to go ahead and say, I think obviously stream it. I don't know. I think people can probably usually tell which one we're going to go with, but just to put it nice and concisely in those beautiful words, definitely stream this one.
Yeah, usually, unless we're pounding on the tables like Khrushchev, it's probably a recommendation, so stream it.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to, I think, and honestly, I was thinking about it. I think this album, the Run the Jewels RTJ4, might have been kind of the genesis of this podcast. I think this album had a lot to do with why we wanted to start it, is because when I realized when I sent that to you, I was like, wow, he's one of the people, like you and Tanner, friend of the pod, Tanner, are two people that, other than my fiance, but I don't have to text her the stuff. I just yell it across the house. That you're the folks that I really look for, to be my kind of musical brethren, that when I discover something that I like, I'm like, well, these guys are probably going to enjoy it too. And when I texted it to you specifically, I'd been thinking about a podcast for a while and how to do it. And then when I texted this one to you, I was like, well, what if I did that podcast with Alex? And I think it was with this album that that thought process really started for me.
Interesting. I did not know that. It's perfect fodder for it, because it's just like, holy shit, we could have done a 2-hour episode on this alone. It's going to be hard to rein ourselves in, but I think we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, I think we're going to give this one its due. Having been familiar with Run the Jewels, and I will say all three of the previous iterations of Run the Jewels have been excellent. Killer Mike and LP are two very unlikely, musical brothers. If you're not familiar, Killer Mike was around with Outkast, the music scene out of Georgia, so back in the day, like Killer Mike's been on a bunch of Outkast songs, very, very politically active, just really great guy in general. And LP is your quintessential white New York rapper. Very, very clever lyrics. Not saying Killer Mike's not clever, because we'll get into it. He's got some extremely clever lines in this. But LP is very much that cerebral, rapper that you always hear about, like kind of like an Eminem type. Just the way that he fits words around and the subject matter that he's talking about. But when they come together, LP does a lot of the production, and then when they come together, it's magic, man. I don't know how they didn't get together before, or what brought them together in the first place, but man, I'm glad they did.
Atlanta meets Brooklyn, man. It is fucking wild. And the thing is, I don't have as much a depth of knowledge of RTJ as you do or as other people do. I've listened to all their output. I was excited when I knew this was coming out. I was really excited when it came out early and you texted me. But I can't claim to be an expert. And I think specifically it's because they're so fucking dense. The albums, the songs are so fucking dense. You could spend, I said it would take us 2 hours to do a podcast on this album alone. You could do a 2-hour podcast on every fucking song on the album.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
just breaking down all the lines. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's not hyperbole to say there's that much to work with. I would say not a diss to LP's, production and anything like that, because it's great. Don't get me wrong. But the star is the message and the lyricism, the way the message is delivered.
Yeah.
This is an album that is almost fucking supernatural because it was all recorded in like November 2019. But again, in the wake of the death of George Floyd, they were like, fuck it, the country needs this album right now. And this is kind of all a preamble to the album too. But when we were talking about Laura Jane Grace last weekend, I had a note that I wanted to talk about, and we just kind of got off and running and we didn't get to really talk about it. But the concept of purity tests in punk music, where there is a certain subset of punk fans who will be like, oh, you sold out because you joined this label. It doesn't matter if you're the first fucking artist on the label, you joined a label, so you sold out. Oh, you didn't do this, you sold out. You did do this, you sold out. And people that are so committed to the punk ethos, even though most of them are totally full of shit. You know, I'm not saying like, oh, every punk is full of shit, but 9 times out of 10, when someone's trying to give you the purity test, they're going to fail it themselves.
Yeah, it's just projection, basically.
It is
what it comes down to, yeah.
And it's this fucking strange expectation that hero is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but our musical influences, our entertainers, our pop icons, that they need to be held to some crazy standard to be viable, that you can't kind of enjoy them warts and all. Like John Lennon was a fucking terrible human being, and only half of his fucking music is good.
Beat that drum, baby. Beat that drum.
You gotta fucking call him like this, you know? Yeah. Michael Jackson, not a great fucking dude as it turns out, but there are songs of his that you still have an attachment to, and it's that quandary of, are you a bad person if you still listen to them? You didn't do these things. Are you lining their coffers by listening to it? It's this dilemma kind of associated with music, and a lot of people take that so fucking far. So one of the complaints that I've actually seen, weirdly enough, about RTJ is that they're hypocrites because they profit off of a political message. But what everyone is missing is that they back their shit up. Killer Mike is starting his own fucking black-owned bank.
Yep.
So tell me how he doesn't talk the talk and walk the walk. They both flat out admit that we're more than happy to have the money that we've made by being good at what we do and being successful in our career. Why shouldn't we enjoy some of the finer things? The difference is we haven't crossed the line to become the capitalists that we rage against.
Yeah.
Where we have a conscience about it and an obligation to use it well.
They gave the album away for free. Every Run the Jewels album, they give away for free. You can buy the vinyl. You can buy their merch and stuff. They'll make money from that. And a lot of that they donate to causes anyway. Like they'll just throw up a random cause and be like, oh, today's merch proceeds are going to such and such, so they absolutely do talk the talk and walk the walk, and I think when people want to get on a pedestal about, them, and I don't even understand that, it's they're to say that, trying to put it into words here, like, why would you be upset about people that are as talented as they are? And there's no question about the talent that both of them have, and there never has been. Like, why are you now all of a sudden upset that they're as famous as they are? And I would argue that Killer Mike more famous now, but he's been a premier rapper for a long time. LP a little bit more niche. I think, you'd have to be very specifically into very, very pure, I say that in quotation, in air quotes, pure hip hop, to really know who he is. But, he's got some classic albums himself. It's not as if these guys came out of nowhere and they've just like found some formula to be successful and they're just taking advantage of it. It's like they have things to say, and it just so happens in this time period in this country, there's a lot of people that want to hear it.
Well, and authenticity in this context is a dangerous word to be slinging around, but so many people, again, it's the purity test. It's like, okay, well, if they're going to sing about fuck the system and the state is your enemy and all these other things, then why is Killer Mike meeting with a politician like Keisha Lance Bottoms? Why the fuck are they profiting off of their art as if you wouldn't do the same fucking thing? Mm-hmm. So, and it's again, a dangerous word to throw around in this context when I'm about to say these guys are legitimately authentic. They mean what they say. I think if you told them tomorrow you'll never make another fucking dime off your music, but that you can keep the base that you have, the message is that important to them.
Yep.
They're driven by their politics genuinely. It's not just these fucking celebrities, Mark Ruffalo, who's like, oh yeah, I'll get naked and do a little PSA about naked balloting and embarrass myself. These fucking fame whore celebrities who don't actually care. It's just about themselves. The last thing that Run the Jewels is about Killer Mike and LP lining their pockets or getting you to tell them how fucking great they are. Yeah. It is about using your love for them to galvanize you into action. Yes. I really believe that.
Yes. And let's get right into it. So
let's do it, baby.
Yankee and the Brave. Now, this is one of the singles that they released right off. This one and Ooh La La, the first two on the album. But man, oh man, Yankee and the Brave. It's like it sets up, that they're this kind of superhero save the world duo, but they are not going to do it in a nice G-rated way. It's right off the bat. Killer Mike says, back at it like a crack addict, Mr. Black Magic, crack a bitch back, chiropractic, craftmatic. Like he can turn a phrase as well as any. I'm like, to be honest with you, I can't believe I just said that without
don't hurt yourself.
over it. Yeah. And he's so good. And he has these references that, they're very regional references, in a black Grand Natty rolling down Old Natty. So that's a high, like a main thoroughfare in Atlanta, Old National Highway, I think is the name of it. But he's talking about being in a Buick Grand National, which is a classic in hip hop culture. That's one of those cars that, they drop the suspensions down, put big rims on and things like that. And it's just all these references to his like Killer Mike, drug dealer kind of culture mixed with these very sharp political messages. And Killer Mike is all of those things at the same time. There's very few people that I think really can embody those all in a single song, and he finds a way to do it.
Yeah, and it's like and again, the magic word, authenticity, but it is almost like a carefully crafted persona. Killer Mike, out there with and I swear to God, if they're not called this, and I fucked this up, I'm so sorry, but the Dookie chain, like the very specific kind of chain that was very popular in hip hop. And it's all the accessories. It's everything to make the look. And that look says something very specific to all different people, and it allows them to operate in this space. And again, it's this very, very political message. So it is like you said, almost like a superhero buddy cop type tableau where they're going to put on their outfits. They're going to go out there and do what they fucking do best. And it takes this super dark turn. I'm jumping way forward, but this is the first time I heard the album, and every time I listened to it since, this is the fucking one that gets me. I got one round left, 100 cops outside. I could shoot at them or put one between my eyes. Chose the latter, it don't matter. It ain't suicide. And if the news say it was, that's a goddamn lie. I can't let the pigs kill me. I got too much pride. And I meant it when I said it, never take me alive. And you could interpret that as, oh, that's just, typical hip-hop bluster. I'm so tough. But you have to fucking look at it harder. And it's this insanely political message about police brutality and this concept of suicide by cop. He wanted to die. And it's like, he's making a point to saying this. No one wants to get killed by a fucking cop. No one wants to give them the satisfaction. No one wants to be a fucking statistic. I will take my own fucking life before I let these dirtbags do it for me. Yeah. It's a fucking powerful message.
Yeah. And they'll call it a suicide, even though they left him no choice, basically,
Yeah.
And so in that instance, you call that murder. If you are the one that instigated somebody dying, there's very few other definitions I would be willing to hear as to what you would call that. And I think that kind of plays into verse 5 with LP, where this kind of gives you that superhero duo thing where he says, I got the Grand Nat running in the alley outside. Now, Michael Render, Killer Mike's real name, run like you hungry and get your ass in the ride. And it's them saying like, we got to go do this album. Like we got to go run the jewels, baby. Like, and it's it's just so good. And he talks, I mean, they go so deep as to say, and you still owe me for them Nikes. You do not get to just die. He's like, I'm saving your life right now because you owe me $80. And it's just
That's
like
fucking great.
The wordplay between the two of them, the relationship that the two of them have is just really incredible. And it's almost like fate that these two came together with how well they perform these songs. They really do seem like just musical blood brothers.
Truly. And it's, again, amazing how one song, I mean, really one album, but like one song in particular, for the sake of this argument, can capture so many things. That friendship, that brotherhood, their hip hop influences, your hip hop persona, the kind of the braggadocio, and then an insanely political message underneath it all. I mean, if this is your first time hearing it, it would blow your fucking mind at the back of your ass. Like,
yeah.
Their dexterity with trying to do everything at once. So many people would fall on their face trying to do this.
Yeah. And see, I think, where you and I differ as far as, when you were talking about the lyrics being the star of the show for you, musically, and LP's production on this is just as important for me because, I've listened to, hip hop and rap forever, as much as I guess a white kid from the whitest state in the union can listen
right.
to. But it's a very, very aggressive beat, right off the bat. And that's kind of what Run the Jewels is known for, is just very, very aggressive, like lines, very aggressive raps, a very aggressive style. And this starts right out. When I heard this single, when they released it, I was like, I knew that it was going to be even better than RTJ3, when they came out with this album, which is, up until that point, RTJ3 was right up there with a couple of DMX albums for my favorite ever, and it's just, and if you know me personally, you know how important DMX,
that's high praise.
Yeah. You know how important DMX is to me, musically. And anybody that wants to try and scoff at the fact that DMX is one of my favorite rap artists, I will challenge you. Go back and listen to And Then There Was X or Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, and tell me that those are not classic hip hop albums, because they certainly are. And we will move right on to Ooh La La. This was the second single that came out from the album. And it's got DJ Premier and Greg Nice on it. And so DJ Premier, if people aren't aware, is very much your classic hip hop DJ, where he's got the records and he'll do the scratching and everything like that, where he's very much that more analog style of DJ versus, kind of this age's digital DJ, where they're going to, he's going to produce the sounds and kind of build a song rather than just plugging in some things on a computer, and not trying to take away from that either, because there's certainly still a lot of talent that's required for making music that way. But he's definitely more from the kind of old school way of doing things. And it's, again, like very political messages. It's when we usher in chaos, just know that we did it smiling. And that's the message with Run the Jewels, is they're like, we are successful enough that it doesn't matter what you say. We're going to say what we want to say, and there's nothing you can do about it now. And I think this song in particular is really putting forth that message, and it's just good. Yeah,
it's chaos as civil disobedience. Again, it's this idea of, we have lived in the real world and we understand what the struggles are. Like, we were not hand selected by anyone to be the star of tomorrow. Like, we scrapped and clawed and did whatever we had to do based on the way that this fucking country runs to get where we are. And you can call it, cutting corners or dishonest means, like, oh, if you sold drugs to get there, how can you be proud of your accomplishment? It's like, how can a fucking CEO of some fucking major company be proud of how they got there? They hurt way more people. So that's another interesting thing that they do in a song like this, is just expose that hypocrisy, to be like, why do we, I could just hear Ben Shapiro, Mr. fucking WAP, being like, why are we glorifying people who act like thugs and who sell drugs to have a career? Why are we glorifying them? Why can't we have more nice Jewish rappers? Like, I can hear his fucking argument right now and go, okay, well, why is that any worse than Donald Trump getting to where he is? Like, everything that he did to get to where he is was malfeasant every step along the way. And he had options. He was a fucking rich white guy. And at least in the case of Killer Mike, not a rich white guy. So he had to do what he had to do.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting in the context of this song.
Yeah. And I think this really sets up their characters as well. Killer Mike has always been a very pointed rapper. When he latches onto a subject, he will twist so many words around telling you about this subject, and he talks about sex a lot is his thing, and he'll find a way to do it no matter what. I mean, there's a song on RTJ3 called Panther Like Panther, and he says, the line is, I refuse to walk around as though my dick itty bitty. I got banana dick, bitch. Your bitch will go ape shit if she hit it. So it's like, he never shies away from that. And in this song, he says, pugilistic, my linguistics are Juro the Jemiah, and I rap it pornographic, bitch, set up the camera. And it's
even before that, in the same verse where he starts it off, first of all, fuck the fucking law. We is fucking raw. Steak tartare, oysters on the half shell, sushi bar, life a bitch, and the pussy fish still fucked her raw.
I'm a dirty dog. I'm a dirty dog. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, it is so good, and he is so good, and so that sets up his character. And then LP is definitely I don't know how many people are familiar with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I imagine there's a lot of folks that are, but there's the episode where they steal all the gasoline and Charlie Day is the wild card. That's his role in the episode. That's LP's role in Run the Jewels, is the wild card. So, he ends his first verse with doing fine. You want maximum stupid? I am the guy. So he's the one that's like, I'll just light this dynamite and toss it in there and see what happens. So he's like, I'm going to say this stuff. We're going to see what shakes loose here. And I think Killer Mike is the one with the plan, and he's the one that's like going to lead the attack, and LP is just there to fuck shit up.
And to that end too, I completely agree, but it's almost at the same time too, Killer Mike is like the student of history, because at some point, I don't want to ruin it, but in one of the songs, and I always forget which one it happens in, but he references fucking Napoleon Bonaparte and I'm going to fuck up the French pronunciation, but Toussaint. The Haitian general.
Yep.
Who is a fucking fascinating guy, and it's kind of like the 1921 Black Wall Street massacre in Tulsa, the shit that they do not teach you in fucking school, and they should. Mm-hmm. And that should tell you something, that we don't learn about these things. But anyway, Killer Mike, the student of history, he has all these like academic references that he drops. And then you have LP, who's just this like paranoid, and not like trafficking in the really bad like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Because for a conspiracy theory to be a conspiracy theory, it's a theory, and B, likely rooted in a less than viable explanation.
Yeah.
But he's the like twitchy, paranoid with good reason kind of guy, and that's what they complement each other so well. Mike is the guy with the plan, and LP is the one who will do whatever it takes to make sure it's executed. Yeah.
And it says things like, here come the menaces to sobriety, like what, a play on Menace to Society. Another reference towards a very classic kind of hip hop culture movie. And also, piety just really isn't us. What a rush. See you cutting up a pie. That's my lunch. And it's just this, their first verse is they're kind of doing that interplay between the two of them for the first time on the album. And you really get the sense that these guys love making music together, that they just love doing it. And they have very different rap styles, but they fit so seamlessly together. And I think it's not just that, it's just, coincidence that it works. It's that they both are very good at understanding how to make it work, and where to jump in with each other. It's just incredible to hear how much fun they have making these songs together.
It's fucking great.
Yeah. And he talks about, another reference that he makes to Scarface. So that's like a classic hip hop reference. But, you always hear about people talking about Tony Montana being, the guy, and like, oh yeah, I'm Tony Montana. Like there's a rapper called Scarface, partly because of that movie. But he says, Sosa was my hero, homie. Tony's a fucking hosa. And, if you've seen Scarface, Sosa is the big drug dealer that Tony Montana gets in touch with, that he really, that's what gets him over the top as a dealer. That's what really sets him into the stratosphere as a coke dealer. But Sosa is this guy that's very, likes to buy off politicians. He doesn't like to make a huge profile for himself, just really likes to lay low. And so that's what you get the sense about how Killer Mike likes to do things. He likes to make sure that he is always ahead of the game, always thinking a step ahead of everybody else. And, he'll use chaos, to borrow a phrase from Littlefinger in Game of Thrones, he'll use chaos as a ladder. Like if chaos happens, like I'll figure it out, but I'm not going to be the one that causes it. I'll leave that to LP.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I won't be left holding the bag. I'll be the one who's holding the bag.
Yes.
There's a difference.
Yes. And then moving on to Holy Calamafuck. Now this one, unbelievable start. So Cuddy Ranks is it says Jamaican dance hall artist. So it starts out, all them a talk, them beat back them words. And the way that they build that beat to me, and again, this is where LP's production, this is why he's like a very much a perfectionist and takes it very, very seriously. Cause he's very much about the art and the craft of hip hop, and Killer Mike is a wordsmith and is about the message and also the art of hip hop, but I think is not so much worried about the production. He lets LP handle that. And then he comes in and just, lays it down. But this song, just the beat is so good. And there's like a beat switch halfway through.
Yeah.
And you just realize how talented they are, that you just realize how good they are at doing what they do, that they're able to just throw that beat switch in there. And then they both have another verse after that on that new beat. And they could have just made it a whole other song, and gotten another track on the album and longer playtime on Spotify and all these places. There's things that they could have done to take advantage of the amount of content that they have, but they're more interested in making the right song rather than just, making money or thinking of it like a capitalist would. And it's just a very interesting thing that they do, because it's not as if they don't have like strong lyrics in the first part either. Every verse on here is very dense, and it's, there's a lot in every one of them. The fact that they made that beat switch and they were like, okay, well, we feel like adding even more to this song. They could have cut it before that and it would have been a full song on its own. It's just, the way that they approach music is so refreshing.
Yeah, and this one musically, because again, especially with rap, my approach, I'm like such a painfully linear person sometimes. I'm like, okay, well, rap as a genre is incredibly message driven, so I really want to focus in on what's being said. So for me, the music, in like the complete reverse of Lianne La Havas, the music is existing to prop up what's being said. And again, that's just like a personal approach because I'm a fucking weirdo. But this one was the one song on the album, this and Pulling the Pin, I think, where the music really took on an increased importance and I like really got sucked into the production. They did so many cool things production-wise with it. So
yeah, and it's kind of calling out people that engage in hypocrisy in the media, in these sort of false flags and stuff like that. A great example is, Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the anthem, and then everybody saying that was because he was trying, he hated the troops and stuff like that, and totally bastardizing the message that he was sending, which was about police brutality and racial inequality, and it's very easy for those of us, that believe in those things to have seen that's what he was trying to do. But the folks that want to put their blinders on, they're always going to find a way to do it. So they kind of play with that in this song. And one of the lines, you hate Run the Jewels, you don't love the troops, so that they attach themselves to the troops so that it's like, okay, well, if you don't, we're saying all this other stuff, but if you say that we're too political for you or that you don't like us, well, now what do you hate the troops? It's right. Very much like calling out the folks that will do that sort of thing. I don't think they would ever put that sort of, qualifier on their music that it's like, oh, if you don't love us, then you must hate, you must hate black people or something like that. It's one of those things that's very clever that they do in making you kind of examine yourself a little bit along with, to be like, are they talking about me? And you get a little bit scared that they are, and it's just so clever how they are so biting and clever with their wordplay that you won't pick those up unless you really listen for it. But there's probably 6 or 7 instances just in this song where they do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And just remember, if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you ain't black.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they're calling
Yeah.
out is shit like that, where it's just like everybody should do their own research and everything. And I think, the fact that they make themselves so available. I mean, if you go on Twitter, you could be very likely to get a response from LP about, whatever it is, whatever question you have. So it's like, it's not as if they're not accessible people to understand exactly what they're talking about. And every time, and you see him call out people like this all the time. Like, they've got no problem actually, like we were saying, walking the walk. It's very refreshing to see artists like this that don't worry about hurting their record sales. And they found a nice niche where it's like, the further they go into political commentary, the better they get, and it's very tough for artists to do that without it sounding very contrived. But this is classic music that's always going to stand up.
Yeah, with them, it's a feature, not a bug. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Now, moving on to Goonies versus E.T. Now, you find that song titles and stuff don't tend to always have like anything to do with what the song's about, really. But this song is just, anger. That's the feeling I get is like they're pissed off. They're like, that's enough is enough. And this is one of the ones that they really strongly get into social commentary. And kind of leave the rest of like bragging about themselves and like LP talking about how he's a crazy white boy and all this stuff. Like, this is where they really dig into some social commentary on this album and pretty much nothing else. And it's, again, so good.
Yeah, and it's like almost very specifically divided into LP's verse being more concerned with pollution and nobody cares about the environment, and then Killer Mike kind of coming in on his verse to talk about media and social media and how it's kind of used to snow us, which is an interesting position to take, especially because they are part of the media. And again, these assholes that want to discredit them would be like, well, you're part of the machine. What aren't you doing that everyone else is doing that makes you so fucking special? And it's like, well, I would draw your attention to the second verse in the fucking song. Amazing, ain't it? How we made it and didn't fake it. Life's a disguise. The truth is but naked. Used to be a time I'd see it and not say it. Now I understand that woke folk be playing. Ain't no revolution is televised and digitized. You've been hypnotized and Twitterized by silly guys. Cues to the evening news. Make sure you're ill-advised. Got you celebrating the generators of genocide. Any good deed is pummeled, punished, and penalized. I mean, fucking chef's kiss right the fuck there.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, and people in my life are probably sick of me talking about Bernie Sanders, but Killer Mike and Bernie Sanders are like friends. Like, we'll eat lunch together level friends, and when he says a line like any good deed is pummeled, punished, and penalized, like, what was Bernie trying to give us? Free healthcare, free college education, guaranteed jobs, minimum wage, all these things that there's nobody that can say that wouldn't make people's lives better. There's no argument against it. The only argument they have is, well, how do we pay for it? You constantly hear that, but this is Killer Mike saying that. He's like, anybody that ever tries to do something good, it is going to be at the expense of the people that already have too much, and they're going to beat it down until it doesn't exist anymore. So, Bernie is going to get the knees cut out from under him, in his primary, because the establishment doesn't want somebody like that, because who they represent is the billionaires and the corporations and the people that funnel all the money to their campaign and make sure that they have a job every 3 years or 2 years or whatever their election cycle happens to be. And it takes artists like Run the Jewels to constantly keep that in our faces, that that's what's going on. Because if you try to watch CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or any of these cable news networks, and they all have their own leanings about which political party they tend to cater to, but overall they all just cater to people that are not you and me.
No one wanted fucking Bernie.
Yeah.
No one in the mainstream media took up for Bernie. He's shrill. He's all like, would you rather have the old, unexciting Jewish man with the fucking soup stains on his tie who wants you to have health care during a global pandemic, Or do you want someone who's flashy and exciting and, oh, look, he's eating a big turkey leg at a Renaissance fair? That's funny and humanizing and relatable. It doesn't mean fucking anything.
Yeah.
But I can't process this guy sitting here rattling off his facts and figures at me because he's a lifelong public servant. That's not memeable.
Yeah.
So I won't do it. And I hate to be like, well, everyone out there is fucking stupid. I don't want to like make a regressive point like that. But some of us, and I fall victim to it every now and then too. Like Lindsey Graham lives rent free in my fucking head because that motherfucker was instrumental in keeping the fucking Merrick Garland nomination from going through and said, well, when and if this happens down the line, make sure you use my words against me. And people did. And he went, fuck it. I didn't actually mean that.
Yeah.
He's a fucking Trump toady. I fucking hate the guy. And I'm like, I can't do anything about it. It's very frustrating. And that in and of itself is a media play too, because they want you to get upset so that you go vote for Joe Biden. And between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, you should vote for Joe Biden. But the point is, we had one of the best options we'll ever have and slept on it because he wasn't flashy. And that's just so fucked up.
Yep. I watched the video of him at his campaign speech in 2016 when the bird came up and landed on the stage with him. Like we could have had Bernie. We could have had him. And it's, someday, hopefully all the folks that Bernie has brought in, the AOCs, the Rashida Tlaibs, and, Ilhan Omar's, all these folks that, get vilified by the right wing. The more that someone's vilified by the right wing, the more I like them, generally. Because I'm like, you must be doing something good. If those are the people you're pissing off, then you're doing the right things. That's how I feel about it. And I guess getting back to Run the Jewels here.
Sorry.
I mean, I certainly don't, I'm not saying we don't need to talk politics or anything, because I'm certainly fine with that. But moving on to Walking in the Snow. This is the one they have Gangsta Boo on there with them. And if for folks that aren't aware, Gangsta Boo was part of that same kind of group down in Atlanta with Killer Mike, and Goody Mob was with them, with CeeLo, Outkast obviously was there. So it's like all these folks that, really revolutionized kind of the Southern sound of hip hop. And there's some great documentaries about it. I absolutely recommend watching some of them, and you'll see Killer Mike factors heavily in this. But they had to get Gangsta Boo involved somehow, because she's just such an integral part of that movement. And I think her and Killer Mike are probably still just close friends. I think from that, I think they all stay pretty close, and I think her and Killer Mike are pretty good friends, and she's very talented as well. But one of the lines in here is just classic Southern hip hop line, which is, just got done walking in the snow. Goddamn, that motherfucker's cold. And it's like, what does that really mean? But it's like, you don't need to really worry about it. It's more of a feeling than a definition that you get from that. And I think that's one of those things that Killer Mike brings to the table, is that very kind of more feeling, substance rather than just speaking it to you. LP will say a million words a minute, so you'll know exactly how he's feeling, but Killer Mike is very good at kind of letting a song breathe a little bit and letting you catch up to him. LP will leave you in the dust and won't even worry about it. But this song in particular is just so good. One of the lines, funny fact about a cage, they're never built for just one group. So when the cage is done with them and you still pour, it come for you. So that's one of those lines where it's, it says, they came for the Jews and I said nothing. They came for black people and I said nothing. They came for gay people and I said nothing. Who do you expect to stand up for you when they come for you? If you didn't stand up for anybody else and you allowed all these groups to become marginalized and become stomped on and become like cast to the edges of society, what happens when that eventually comes for you? Because unless you're one of the billionaire elites, it's going to come for you someday. So you better start sticking up for people and making some alliances with them now, in the name of humanity and civil rights and just basically being a decent human being. You better do that now before it's too late.
Well, and again, pursuant to that, a really brilliant thing, and it happens on the next song too, is giving people, there's not only that thought, like think that over, the fact that the time is now to jump in together, and let's give you a clear example why. And verse 2, Killer Mike, the way I see it, you're probably freest from the ages 1 to 4. Around the age of 5, you're shipped away for your body to be stored. They promise education, but really they give you tests and scores, and they predict in prison population by who's scoring the lowest, and usually the lowest scores the poorest, and they look like me. And every day on the evening news, they feed you fear for free. And you so numb, you watch the cops choke out a man like me until my voice goes from a shriek to a whisper, I can't breathe. And these are legitimate. I mean, this was not written about George Floyd, but this could have been. Like, these are images we see, and his whole point is you see this shit and you don't fucking you go on a big Twitter rant about how it's a gross injustice, but what are you actually doing about it? You have to get angry and you have to get off the bench, because when they're done doing this to us, who do you think they turn on next? And this is a concrete example of the pain that's being caused and why you should fucking give a fuck more than just getting your chits on Twitter for being a good, woke person.
Yep. And another line, I mean, this is, again, I think, so we talked before we start recording, we always do, a little catch up about, what we're planning on doing for the show. And I mentioned, I was like, I started writing down line after line after line after line, because every single song has 10 or 12 lines that, could be relevant to talk about on the podcast, but, then we'd be here for 4 hours talking about all of it. So I tried to kind of cull it back a little bit with that. But one of the lines in particular on here, never forget, in the story of Jesus, the hero was killed by the state. And there's all these, and they say the line pseudo-Christians as well in this, where it's like these folks that, practice bigotry and all these, and racism and these things in the name of religion. And if you really paid attention to the Bible, and, I'm certainly not a religious person, but I'm very familiar with the stories of the Bible. I grew up reading them, getting them told to me on Sundays. It was never, I don't have an unhealthy view of religion or anything, but if you pay attention to it, first of all, Jesus was a brown guy. He's not a white guy from the middle of America. That idea needs to get out of people's heads, as well as he was definitely a socialist, 100%. He talked about how people shouldn't have too much money, that if you have too much money, you need to give some back, because if there's people that are homeless in your area and you have too much money, like, that's a failure. You are a failure for doing that. And people don't understand in this, if Jesus were around in our time period and the Bible is accurate to how he would have acted, he would not have anything to do with Republicans and the Donald Trump party. And it's so easy to tell that, but the folks that spew religion as a shield to their bigotry and racism, they'll never come to terms with that. And it's just baffling to me that it's like, if you want to beat that drum, you're not really listening to the music that's going along with it. You can't just pick and choose about these things, because it doesn't make sense to do so. And that's why I think people like Killer Mike and LP and you and I get so angry when we see these things, because they're using what should be a very good thing. Religion on its base is not a bad thing. If it's a story about how to be a good person, I see nothing wrong with that. If you're using it as an example of how to live your life to the fullest and watch out for your neighbors and love thy neighbor, all these lessons that are taught in the Bible, if you're using those 100%, I agree with you. Do that. But if you're using it for the reasons that the politicians are nowadays, in this Supreme Court justice that's up for nomination right now, hiding behind that religion as like saying you're a moral person because you're religious, it just doesn't fly. It doesn't jive with me. No.
I mean, I have very little to contribute, because that very much encapsulates A, what I'm thinking, and B, what the fucking crux of it is. So I if anything, I can dovetail us into Just, the next song.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing a very similar thing where in Walking in the Snow, it's this idea of, okay, well, you do realize Jesus would not be eating at McDonald's with Tucker Carlson. It's again doing a very brilliant thing, because if Walking in the Snow said, okay, you see these injustices on TV and you need to be aware that this will happen to you next once they're finished with us, Just does this very brilliant thing, because the line, look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar, obviously referring to the dead presidents on our money. I realize maybe not so much now in the credit card and Amazon Prime age, but like cash, money is something you have on you that you would ostensibly look at every day. So looking back at you is not just historically someone who owned black slaves, but it's also a symbol of the capitalist system that is oppressing you and the people who make it run. And these, Washington and all these other guys are emblematic of the people that are our masters.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, poor white people, poor black people, poor Hispanics, like all of us are in the same boat. More than anything, class is what unites us and divides us.
And
if
I think
everybody,
that's yeah, sorry, go ahead. Didn't realize.
Go for it.
So that's I think the point that they're trying to make is that, what really matters is not the color of your skin, although that has mattered in the past, and certainly is something that needs to be addressed, but in order to make everybody equal. So what shouldn't matter is the color of your skin, and what does matter is the fact that, all of us that are working, $15, $20 an hour jobs, or, $60,000 or $70,000 a year if you're on salary, you can talk about even people making over $100,000. What you're doing is making a lot of money for somebody else, that in the event that you had a major health problem or personal problem or something like that would probably cut you off in a second. The second you stop being productive for them, so it's talking about the literal slave masters on our dollar, George Washington, and people like that. But it's also talking about modern day, where it's like, what are we working for? Like, what is our labor going towards? What is our well-being going towards? And I had, a job recently, as a travel agent. I'm not going to mention the company because I don't want to give them any shine whatsoever. But we're a terribly run company, where it's, if you kiss enough ass, you make it. And if you gouge your customers, you make a lot of money, and I wasn't willing to do either of those things. So it's like, how is someone like me that supposed to get ahead? How is someone like me supposed to do that? If I'm not willing to screw somebody else over, then I'm going to stay right where I am. And that to me is kind of the way our society is now. That's a very bad thing. That's how we get exactly to where we are now, is if your success is at the expense of someone else, or is the only way for you to be successful is at the expense of someone else, then that's a problem, and the heads of these corporations and the owners of these corporations, like Jeff Bezos, people like that. Think of all of these folks that are having to go to work dealing with a pandemic right now, because otherwise they don't get to eat, because our government's not helping either,
Right.
And it's just all of these folks that have more power than us are basically in control of what we're doing. And it's time that we all kind of take a good look at that and understand that it's not good. And if we don't do something about it now, it's only going to get harder.
And it's the irony of working so hard to play the game, an evil rigged game, and that's all you're doing. You're like the fucking misnomer, like, well, work hard and be decent and you can get ahead in the American dream. But inevitably, again, there's the irony of like, oh, why are we glorifying people that used to sell drugs? It's like, well, you'll do whatever it fucking takes to reach your goal and have your American dream. And in the end, you're still a slave to the capitalist system. You think you're gaming the system, but you're playing exactly into the system's hand. Be smart enough to realize that. And I realize that we can't all just throw up our hands and go, okay, well, it looks like, we should all go, we won't pay our fucking taxes. If we could all agree to that and go, fuck it, we won't pay another goddamn dime until the government meets some of our fucking demands, that's great. But short of that level of unity that we realistically won't reach, yes, you have to work within this shitty capitalist system, but it doesn't mean you have to be a fucking simp for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think specifically, to get back to the specific songs, and I love the fact that this album can cause discussions like we're having, that not only is it incredible musically and lyrically, that it allows you to think deeper and allows you to examine things about yourself, about society, in a way that you might not have before. And they certainly put things in words, in a way that I wouldn't have been able to myself. So when, it allows me to relate to things a little bit differently. And if I need an example, they give it to me, and I think specifically here, in your country getting ran by a casino owner, Trump, pedophiles sponsor all these fucking racist bastards, talking about Jeffrey Epstein, obviously Harvey Weinstein, these political and entertainment elites that are they're donating so much money, both sides of it. And I told you once before that you should kill your master. It's true. Now that's the line that'll probably going to get my ass assassinated. So he's very much acknowledging that what he's saying is a problem, but he's almost also saying, like, come and get me. Like, they're going to know why it happened if I die. It's like, it's a challenge. That's where, anybody that talks about Killer Mike and LP selling out, if they even say that, this is the kind of line where that argument totally falls apart, because they are putting themselves out there. They don't have to do this. They're both talented enough to rap about whatever they want, and they probably sell a ton of records because, they're just that good. But they choose to use their platform for something like this. Like you said, Killer Mike starting a black-owned bank. Like, think about, the access that in a lot of areas isn't available to people for that. Like, when I think about that, I'm like, I have a choice of which bank I want to use. Like, there are people that don't have a choice of any bank because there just aren't any, because it's not profitable for one to be in their area. So the idea is, and then folks want to try to have, the post office be, a basic bank offering, small loans, a place for people to deposit their money to keep it safe so they don't have to keep it in the mattress, and those ideas get shot down because they want to keep folks in those areas exactly where they are. The less education, the less power they give them, the more likely that folks like Lindsey Graham are going to be able to stay where they're at, and that's where voter suppression comes in, because they can say, well, there's no money getting spent in that area. There's no business in that area. So why should we worry about that area? And it's just, why should we not represent the areas where people, invest their money, where property taxes are higher? And so those are the areas that get the attention, and the other areas get forgotten about. And it takes folks like Killer Mike. He doesn't need to do that, but it takes folks like him to take it upon themselves to fix those situations. And he is, like we were saying, he is walking the walk. And it's great to have an example, especially in hip hop music where, I always loved hip hop music. It's great to have an example there, that I feel proud to follow, in Killer Mike and LP.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. And moving on to Never Look Back. Now, this is one of the most personal songs on the album. It's pretty rare with Run the Jewels. I think with LP and Killer Mike individually in their music, they don't shy away from talking about their families and things like that. But in Run the Jewels, they don't tend to do that. It tends to be very specifically either that very braggadocious kind of hip hop, or very politically driven, or just ridiculous. They have those three things they do all the time. They don't tend to get super personal, but it is, it's about the lessons that their parents taught them, whether it was a good lesson or a bad lesson, and about their elders and their mentors and things like that. And it's just a very good look at them that they don't show at any other part of the album.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have in my notes, it's a reflection on how you were raised, what you incorporated from both parents, and the fact that you can't, I mean, it's called Never Look Back, so there's no point in experiencing regret over it. You don't have to like certain behaviors or certain things about yourself, but you can't change it. You can only move forward. And ostensibly, some of these things got you where you wanted to go. Like Killer Mike's verse is all talking about how, like, his mom, he says she was queen pinning, and makes her sound like a real fucking tough lady who got it done no matter what, and took care of her family and would do what by whatever means it took. And that he honors that in her by doing the exact same thing. Like, by hook or by crook, I will make sure that the message gets out there. I get what's mine, but I'm not here to fuck everybody. I'm here to raise all ships and to make something for myself along the way. And it's partially about legacy, hers and mine, and partially about showing people a better way. It's a lot wrapped up into a very short song that on the surface you wouldn't necessarily stop and think too much about, but there's a lot to unpack in it.
Yeah, it's getting a look at Killer Mike, or getting a look at Michael Render, and Jamie, I can't remember what LP's last name is, but
Yeah.
you know, it's getting a look at them as people. One of my favorite lines in here, and I don't know if people, and I don't watch a ton of the NBA, but I pay attention to a lot of sports news. And there was an NBA player when they first started trying to come back, and they were supposed to be isolated while still traveling to other cities. You know, he left the bubble and went to this club called Magic City in Atlanta, which is apparently like one of the most famous strip clubs in the country, has some of the best wings you'll ever eat in your life. You know, and it's like only in a place like Atlanta would you have that, where it's like a cultural icon, you know, because we think about a strip club. I think of Planet Rock in Barrie, Vermont, which is a disgusting, awful place. And I think it's called the Bada Bing now, if it even still exists. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, that helps its credibility immensely.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, not a great place. But this one, he said, you know, Uncle Luke, don't stop, get it, Magic City. You know, he's talking about his Uncle Luke being an influence on him, probably taking him to Magic City. You know, and it's just, it's a place that gets referenced in especially Southern hip hop all the time. And it's just great to see Killer Mike, like, not forget that he was, you know, part of that group with Outkast and all them that probably spent a lot of time at that place.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. That's fucking. And yeah, it's just, again, the whole theme of remembering where you came from and not being fucking ashamed of it. Because I'm sure there are plenty of people that would turn up their fucking nose at the idea of like, oh, a strip club, and it can be spun into an anti-woman argument or something like that. But that also doesn't hold water, because he later talks about how he supports the unionization of sex workers.
Yep.
So anytime you think he's not being very conscious of what he's saying and doing, he proves you the fuck wrong.
Yep.
He is thinking of how everybody can do better and how everybody can benefit.
And that actually segues us perfectly into the next song, The Ground Below. And this is where he has that line, not a holy man, but I'm moral in my perverseness, so I support the sex workers unionizing their services. And it's very much like Killer Mike is never going to lie to you about who he is. Like, he loves going to a strip club. He always talks about how much he loves his wife, but that he wishes he could still run and gun like he used to, you know? And so it's very much, you know, I think by being that honest with himself, it keeps him from making those mistakes that would ruin his life. I think by saying that he's got these urges and these intentions and things that he wants to do, I think that keeps him from actually acting on them and ruining things with his life, you know, because I think he does love those around him, but he's still Killer Mike. You know, he's always going to have that inside him where he's like, yeah, I still like to party. Like, I still like to do all that stuff, you know, and I think just his honesty is always very refreshing, because he does brag a lot, but he also is very self-deprecating sometimes too. Like, he calls himself chubby all the time in all the songs. So it's like he's very well aware of himself, and I certainly appreciate that.
Well, and there's that line. I think it's either Yankee and Brave or Ooh La La, where he's talking about like running, thighs chafing, fucking up my Levi's or something like that. Like, it's great imagery. It's self-deprecating. It's a fun touch. Like, and it all ties in with, I think, the main thrust of The Ground Below, which is that reputation is pretty much all you have at the end. Your money can be taken away from you. Your family could leave you if you fuck up. The one thing you have is your name, and that you need to kind of reflect on your values, and you need to protect that name at all costs. It's kind of what I got out of this song anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he talks about, there's always, you know, I don't think he's a particularly spiritual person, but he does touch on, you know, religion and things like that. Cause I think you know, in the South, I think you do grow up with it one way or the other, no matter what.
Yeah.
But I think he has a good kind of relationship with it. And here, this is the song where he has the line about Bonaparte and Toussaint.
Yes.
Yes. But he said, you know, in here, one of his lines is playing blackjack versus death, gun on the car dealer, just bought a demon. I'm screaming up out the car dealer. And demon being like a super souped up version of the Dodge Charger, I think. What, you know, kind of the throwback to the old muscle car, but I think it's got like 900 horsepower or something like that. It's
fucking
crazy car. But he's like playing blackjack versus death. So he's like, if I lose, I die, but I'm like got my gun on the car dealer. So he's like, I'm winning this one. So he's like, I'll play the game, but I'm going to tip the odds in my favor, you know? And I think that's his idea, where he's like, you know, I'm always going to be forthright with how I'm feeling about things. So that allows him to be able to say whatever he wants, because he doesn't have to answer to anybody. He only has to answer to himself. I think when it comes down to it is what he's trying to say. And it's really, I don't know. It's just so good, man.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. And moving on to Pulling the Pin. Now, this one features Mavis Staples, who is, excuse me, a singer from, I want to say the 70s. She was with the Staples Singers, right?
I believe she's in her 70s now.
Yeah, so she's getting up there. But she was on The Last Waltz, did the cover of The Wait with the band. So she's got some real musical bona fides. And I've seen her actually in concert at a festival one time, and she's still got it. I mean, she's still really, really good. So this song called Pulling the Pin also features Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age. We don't need to really get into him. He's a super dickhead, but very talented musician. And one of the lines is, "Fuck the political, the mission is spiritual." So I guess why I said Killer Mike is not a spiritual person, I guess that means more like the kind of Christianity spiritual. He is a spiritual person in that he believes we're all, connected, and we do owe each other some help. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. But it's not so much, he's not preaching at you. You know what I mean? It's very much like, come join me. Like, let's make the world better. And I think that's a very good message that he puts forth.
Well, it's the human spirit. Exactly. It's an abstract thing. It's what connects us all. What do we owe to each other, as opposed to, the fucking Jesus Christ, Hulk Hogan, eat your prayers and say your vitamins. Well, I fucked it up, and it's better that way. But, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a dogmatic, like, he's not prescribing a way to live so much as it is an appeal for everybody to realize what's at stake for all of us, and to just put that shit aside and come together. And it's also a very fucking angry song, because I think he sees it as, again, it's spiritual it's spiritual, not political, in the sense that something like the unity of the human race should not be politicized or used for political means, but it always is. We're in a fight for this nation's soul, MAGA, all these fucking things that are so short-sighted in the grand scheme of things. And it's this frustration for him or for both of them. I mean, I keep primarily focusing on Killer Mike, but it's this desperate cry for there to be universal truths, not one side and another.
Yeah, and it's, he definitely, Killer Mike especially gets into it, but LP has a few good lines right at the beginning. From a long line of the rancidest swine came the violators, the cloven-foot designers of high crime for the Iron Ages, twisting down through time, them trying to unwind creation. Don't be surprised, it's a mistake to think that their influence had faded. Well, what a wretched state of danger we've made here, I thought to me. So I think it's saying that we have allowed this to fester and grow for so long that, the idea of, the racism that it took for slavery to exist in the first place, that racism still exists. Slavery in that sense might not, but the feeling that caused it does. So if we don't do something about it, we could very well end up back in that same place. So that's what he's saying, twisting down through time, see them trying to unwind creation, which is like trying to unwind all of the progress that we've made since then, in order to go back to that. Because in their mind, and Lindsey Graham just said it in the hearings for this Supreme Court nominee, do you feel like we need to go back to the good old days of segregation? And in his mind, I think he was just saying like the old days of segregation. But, when Freud was talking about, that Freudian slip, you always say what you mean. He said the good old days. So to him, life would be better if, he was able to subjugate more people, and I think that's the idea that they're talking about in this song, is that if we're not careful and we let this continue the way it is, that we're going to end up back in that place, maybe not, and probably worse than we were, because now we have the technology that we can spread these views and these ideals way faster than they could spread in, whenever slavery actually started in the U.S., like 1400s or whenever we got here for the first time.
From the jump street.
From the get-go, as soon as white people got here, that's when it started. But it's, it's just that idea has not faded. It's changed, it's morphed in how it's presented to you, but that ideal has not faded. And if we're not careful, it's going to get us again.
Yep. Yeah, I think this, and then to begin the process of bringing us home to with you get into I wrote it down as firing squad, but the full a few words for the firing squad radiation.
Mm-hmm.
It's that sentiment is very much carried over into the final song, and obviously it's the image of, okay, these guys have been saying some very transgressive stuff, and there's been this image throughout the album of, oh, the state's the enemy, the state's probably going to get us for this one, and then all of that is personified here. The state did catch up to Killer Mike and LP, put him up against the wall, gave him a cigarette, and said, any last words? And this is sort of the last gasp of the album, but not the last gasp of what they're fighting for. Mm-hmm. It's meant to kind of spur us on to keep fighting the wanton cruelty. And I also really keyed in on one weird thing about this, because it is an overtly political song, but also to the point that I've been making about this idea of purity tests and how, you know, oh, well, if they're making money, they're capitalists. And if they're capitalists, how can they be enemies of the state? And if they're not enemies of the state, how can they not be full of shit? So these guys, by making money off of this, are hypocrites. But I put this to you. It'd be a lie if I told you that I ever disdained the fortune and fame, but the presence of the pleasure never abstained me from any of the pain. When my mother transitioned to another plane, I was sitting on a plane, telling her to hold on, and she tried hard, but she just couldn't hang. All of which is to say, all the fucking money in the world, right? And he couldn't save the person he loved. Mm-hmm. So does having money somehow make it so that he never has a bad day, never feels pain? He's a fucking human being. And this instinct to tear him and people like him down because they have what we want is to miss the point entirely. It's like, again, this misnomer that because he's making money, he's automatically full of shit, I think is completely dispelled with something like that. Having money doesn't fucking save you. And that's what he's trying to tell us, is don't get so fucking focused on this other shit that doesn't matter. Stick to the message, which is we're all in it together. If we stand arm in arm against, it's Bernie Sanders shit, the 99% versus the 1%. Mm-hmm. If we could just organize, they have no fucking prayer against us.
Yep. And that's true. And I mean, I think it goes to show, like, fortune and fame, like alcohol, just amplify who you really are. So, you know, the more successful Killer Mike gets, it tends to be the more that I like him, because the more he gets to put his message out there and everything. So it's, you know, and especially with this album, you know, I think this is kind of right now is their like magnum opus. You know, we'll see what they do with RTJ5, because I don't think they're going to slow down. Excuse me. I keep coughing here. I swear I don't have the Rona. So if you're listening, you're not going to get it. Don't worry about it. But the, you know, the way that they put this together is very much they're aware of their position and how influential they are in the scene, but they're still having so much fun with it. And I love this album. I mean, the first time I listened to it, I listened to it all the way through, and then I put it back to the start again. Because and I've probably listened to it through 20 times since it's come out. I mean, it's just that good.
And it's 40 minutes long. I mean, you could just shotgun it back to back.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
not even 2 hours of your life.
Yeah. Absolute stream it for me. And I do want to point out the last words in this before they go into kind of the outro little monologue. Go hard. Last words to the firing squad was fuck you too. So even in their moment where they know that the state is going to get them, or that they're going to get canceled or whatever, they're going to say, it doesn't matter. We're going to keep saying what we've been saying, you know, which is, you know, fuck you and what you've done to this country and these people.
And you can't cancel someone you didn't give a fucking audience or a platform to. They had to fight for it. They earned what they fucking got, and you can't fucking take it away. Good fucking luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely stream it. Love this album. Please go for it.
Stream it. God damn it.
Yeah. So I was just looking at our time, and we have set a record for longest podcast episode yet.
Goddamn.
Yeah, which is, you know, that's what we do here. We just set records, pop bottles, set records. That's what we do. So we're gonna skip the other segment we were gonna do. We're gonna push that one back again. But don't worry, folks, it'll happen sometime. But again, we're gonna be recording another episode, just kind of a standalone episode. That's going to be about the 500 greatest albums of all time that Rolling Stone released this year. That's an update from their 2003 list. So make sure you check that out. Definitely check out our socials. Instagram, you find us Out on That Line. Instagram or Twitter, be Out on That Line 1. The Gmail, if you want to write us a nice long form email, we can judge you on your grammar and syntax. You can get us at outonthatline@gmail.com. Alex, you got anything else?
I have nothing else to add. Just until next time you hear from us, stay woke, everybody.
Yes. Till next time.